I think we'll go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone to this Zoom event with Carnegie-Stout Public Library. My name is Mike May. I'm one of the librarians here at Carnegie-Stout, and I'm very excited that we have with us David Ryan, who wrote the book Exploring Galena and Dubuque on Foot. We're on Zoom, and it's kind of a new thing for us, a little bit of an experiment. So if there are any technical troubles or issues, try to re-enter the meeting, and I'll stay here as long as possible to keep things up and running. And we'll kind of play it by ear and see how it goes. We're recording this session, and if the recording goes well, we may share that at a later time. I think most people are muted, and at the end of the presentation, we'll take questions through the chat function. So if you have questions or comments, if you could use the chat, we'll be able to communicate that way. I'd like to introduce our guest. David Ryan is a dedicated hiker, wanderer, and an explorer, and he has written several outdoor books, and he blogs about walking at gentleartofwandering.com. I'll let David explain. He's in Albuquerque right now, so I'll let him explain his connection to the region and how he started working on the book.
Okay, good. Well, first off, I want to thank everybody for coming. Before getting started, can everybody hear me okay and see me okay? So hopefully you can, because everybody's muted. But you know, also I want to thank Mike for setting this up, and Carnegie-Stout for allowing us to get together. Obviously, I would love to be there in person, but because of COVID, it just isn't happening right now. But the book, Exploring Galena and Dubuque on Foot, and this is the book, but we'll talk about that later, is about getting out of the car and seeing what you can discover when you walk around one of the most scenic areas of the country. And as somebody who's done lots of road trips back and forth as the country, the Dubuque area is probably one of the greatest secrets in the country. That I don't think there's any place quite as pretty as the setting of Dubuque. But and then when you throw in all the architecture, it's just a great place to explore. But in addition to making discoveries as you walk around, you also have the opportunity to engage in an awe walk. And I know you can't see this, but on September 30th, 2020, this year, the New York Times had an article called An Awe Walk, and it was, an awe walk might do wonders for your well-being. Older men and women who took a fresh look at the objects and vistas around them felt more upbeat and hopeful. Consciously watching for small wonders in the world around you during an otherwise ordinary walk would amplify the mental health benefits of the stroll, according to an interesting new psychological study of what the study's authors call awe walks. And something very similar to an awe walk would be forest bathing if you're walking in a wooded area. The Japanese term for that is Shinrin Roku. And what forest bathing is, it's not jumping in a creek and taking a bath in the middle of the woods, but it's really just being mindful and present and allowing the energy of the forest to calm you down. And in Japan, forest bathing is a prescribed medical treatment. But the seed for the book, Exploring Galena and Dubuque on Foot, came to me several years ago when I was working on this book, The Gentle Art of Wandering. And in that book, wandering is about allowing yourself to see and then letting what you see guide you on where you go. And so like forest bathing, it's about being mindful and present when you're walking. And when you're mindful, you're always going to find something that will amaze you when you go out for a walk. It's really like looking at the world with a new pair of eyes. And all of the walks described in the book, Exploring Galena and Dubuque on Foot, are based upon the principles of wandering. And it was while working on that book that I discovered exploring a community. Well, in this case, it was the hilly neighborhoods of Los Angeles by climbing up and down public stairways. And it was just incredible. And after doing that, I realized, there have to be stairways in Galena and Dubuque. And so as a result, my dog Petey and I, we took a road trip to Dubuque to climb stairs. And it was amazing because it wasn't only the stairs, it was all the neighborhoods and all the art, the Victorian architecture and all the decoration from the housing that made it so cool. There was like every corner, every time we turned, we found something special. And so that's why, so it was doing the book about wandering that led to public stairs that brought me back to Dubuque and Galena to climb the public stairs. And as a result, I wrote some blog posts, and this was several years ago. And those blog posts, for the wandering blog, those blog posts are still read every day, that there's always somebody stumbling across them. And so eventually, I decided, well, maybe there's some potential for doing a book about the Dubuque area. And so as a result, Petey and I, we made a hardcore effort to really explore the area, and that's how we came up with it. But as for why somebody from Albuquerque, New Mexico would do something about Galena and Dubuque is that I grew up in the Chicago area and spent most of my adult life in Chicago, but my father's family's roots go back to the Galena and Dubuque area. And so I've always was familiar with the area and had visited the area, but had never thought about the stairs until I did the wandering book. And in fact, I do have two grandparents buried in the area. My last name is Ryan, and there's a place in Dubuque called the Ryan House. Well, that would have been my second great grandfather's brother who built those houses. So, and the two of them had a meat packing business in Galena until they split up, one going to Dubuque and the other staying in Galena. So I do have, some real significant connection to the area. And so after Petey and I, visited Galena several times, we started working on this book about this time last year. And the book came out in April of this year, April of 2020. And obviously, I would like to be there in person, but because of COVID, I can't. And so, but I do want to make a point that the book isn't just about stairways. It's about walking around, exploring neighborhoods. But the focus is on the older neighborhoods of Dubuque, because those were developed before driving around became commonplace. And so therefore those neighborhoods were built for walking. And that's what makes them the most of greatest interest. And I do have, several slides. So I just want to sort of go through just to give you the idea of this idea of wandering and the things that you can discover along the way. And once we're done with the slides, we should have plenty of time for any questions that come up. And certainly if there's a bit greater discussion, I'll be happy to, talk to you, on, at a different, after the meeting. So it won't be any problem. So, if Mike can bring up the PowerPoint, and hopefully we can go through it.
Yep, I'm just I'm putting a message in the chat just so people can see where that is.
Okay.
And then we'll get started. Okay, Mm.
Oh,
Oh, I think I advanced the slide a little too
That's all
far.
right. Well, you just saw the slide of the book go by real quick. So, so what we'll do is we'll just start walking right from the library at the corner of 11th and Bluff. And what we'll do is, now the slide's not moving, Michael. Can you check to see what's going on? Okay. All right. I'm still not controlling the screen, so.
Are you able to do it now?
No, it's not controlling now, so.
Oh, okay. Well, I can, I'll.
All right, well, if you go ahead and advance, what we'll do is we'll just start walking right from the library at 11th and Bluff. And if you just advance the screen, we'll head west and we'll go up the stairway right there. It starts off as sidewalk stairs. And if you notice, there's a small stairway going through the portal. Living in Dubuque, you probably are aware that 100 years ago, there was a funicular railroad going from the library, right across the street from the library, all the way to the top of the bluff. And, it was very much like the Fenelon Place elevator going all the way up to the top of the bluff. And I believe it was in the late 20s when that funicular railroad was discontinued. So go ahead and advance again. And so when you get out of when you come through the portal, and I climbed hundreds of stairways in 20 different states in the country. And I want to say that this stairway at 11th Street is one of the most magical stairways in the country, because when you land here at the portal, and this is at Grove Terrace, it's really like if you've ever seen the movie Wizard of Oz, and you remember the scene where Dorothy and Toto land in Oz, and it goes from black and white to full and living color. That's what it's like coming out of this portal. And if you go ahead and advance the slide, Michael, can you advance it? If you look around in every direction, you just have these fabulous houses. And no matter which way you walk, you're just going to run into amazing things. And Michael, if you just advance it again, right across the street, the stairway continues. And so if we just go up the stairs, and Mike, if you go ahead and advance it. And just, when we get to the top and you look around, you've got this tremendous view looking across Dubuque, across the Mississippi River, out to Wisconsin and Illinois. But in every direction, if you go ahead and advance, across the street, you have these fabulous houses. This is a corner of 11th and Alice. And go ahead and advance. And if you go south on Alice Street to Wilbur, you have this massive, limestone block retaining wall. And I suppose if there's, as an outsider, I would say that if you had one signature item that you could really say, it has a feeling this is Dubuque, it's this abundance of these massive retaining walls, and they're just so spectacular that I think it, I'm not privy to all the things that Dubuque does to promote itself, but certainly these massive walls are just, I find them rather wondrous. And what they what they've led to is in the development of these bluffs, it's almost like a wedding cake with tier upon tier upon tier above each other, because above this massive wall, there's another tier of development. So Mike, if you go ahead and advance it again. So now, but if you go the other direction, if you go north from the top of the stairs, you can circle around the top of the stairs and you get to Highland Place. And then just going down here, you've got fabulous houses. And I cannot, reiterate enough that no matter which way you turn, you're going to run into wonderful things to notice. So yeah, just go ahead and advance it again. This house actually is on Grove Terrace, but the picture is taken from Highland Place looking down to it. So this is typical of the houses you'll find. Go ahead and advance again. And then coming around on Grove Terrace, again, you can see, the wonderful houses just keep going. And so, but if you just keep going, so let's say if we go back to the stairs and, go back up to the top and head west on 11th Street, go ahead and advance. There's still plenty of houses. It just doesn't stop of what you're going to discover. And let's go to the next slide. That if you work your way off the bluff, from 11th Street, you'll eventually get, if you go to the north, you'll eventually get to Loris. And what's, one of the things that's really interesting here is, and again, you can see the retaining wall, is that you've got an intersection with, really two roads. That one road is Dell Street going uphill, and then the other one is the alley behind Loris that's circling around at the level of Loris. So and there's several places in Dubuque where you're going to find these double street intersections, one road going to one level and the other road, servicing a different one. So let's go one more slide. That same building at Loris and Dell just has this wonderful mural at it. And I know when Petey and I made our first trip to, Dubuque to climb stairs, the murals weren't there. But this is something that, we have found in the last few years. And these murals are just everywhere, and they just add so much, I believe, to the streetscape. And it's just one more thing that you can discover as you walk around. And so if we were to continue north of Loris, again, we're not going to run out of places to check out. But eventually, and go ahead and advance the slide. Eventually, we'll get to this stairway that connects Montrose Terrace down to Bluff Street, just south of 15th. And this stairway is really cool because it's almost like a little park that it takes you through. And so, and again, if you were done walking, you could easily get back to the library to wrap up your walk. But if you want to keep walking, go ahead and advance the slide. But, one of the things I want to point out is, it's not only looking, forward, but if you turn around to see where you've been, that this is something I find just so cool, when I'm walking around Dubuque, is you get these layers of houses, and it almost looks like houses stacked up on each other. So, and you can get this kind of view, especially if you just walk along Bluff Street. You'll see this view of houses upon houses everywhere you go. And so go ahead and advance a slide. But if we go on 15th Street, immediately, we're going to run into this house. This is the Richard House. And if I'm not mistaken, this is at 15th and Locust. And when I took this picture, which is really just about a year ago, it was undergoing renovation. I don't know if that renovation is still going on or if it's done, but the details on that house are incredible. And I know it's a place where you can, at least a year ago, it was had lodging, and if the inside is anything like the outside, it's got to be just an incredible place to check out. And so go ahead and move the slide again. And as we just go, immediately to the Richards house, I found this just such a, sort of a stunning view, because what you have are two Catholic churches within a long fly ball of each other. They're less than a quarter of a mile apart. And the church in the distance, that was St. Mary's. It's no longer a church. It's now a development called Steeple Square. And then the church closest to us is St. Patrick's. But what's interesting about it is that one parish served a German-speaking congregation, and the other parish served a predominantly Irish population. And I know if you go into other big cities, you're going to find something very similar, where you're going to have churches within proximity of each other that were built to serve different ethnic groups. And I don't know if this was intentional, or if it was just happenstance, but having these separate churches allowed new arrivals to the country to start assimilating, to become Americans, let's say. And so and it was just so cool how these various institutions that would cater to an immigrant group just help people adapt to their new country. So let's just keep going east on 15th Street. When you get to Central, you just have all of these, you start getting murals, and I love this mural. But if you stand at this corner, you look at every corner has either a mural or a building that has been renovated, or a building that has special details on it. So let's go ahead and advance. And again, this is just one of the murals that you have. And let's go ahead and advance again. This building here is at 16th and Central. And, when it was built in the 1800s or 1880s, it was built as a grocery store. And that would be showing, indicate part of the walkability of the community, that you had, all the services that we now just go to a shopping center or a mall or a place with a big parking lot to go. Well, when people had to walk around, they couldn't lug stuff, forever. So everything was close, that there were grocery stores and meat markets and what have you, all within walking distance. But what I find interesting in this building is not the modernization at the bottom, but up at the top, the windows and the ornamentation and that logo, which, thank you, Michael May, for finally solving that for me, that was the initials of the owner of the person who built the grocery store. It was J.P. Schroeder. So, and when I was talking to Michael yesterday, I showed him this picture. I said, I've been trying to figure out what the heck this is, for months. And so, thank you very much, Michael, for solving that mystery for me. So let's just go one more slide. All right. This obviously is the old brewery at 30th and Jackson. When I started this project, one of the first things I did is I got a topo map. And looking at a topo map of Dubuque, the first thing that, shouted out to me was the Cooler Valley, because here you had this almost narrow canyon-like land feature, almost going straight into downtown Dubuque from the northwest. And obviously that was the former route of the Little Maquoketa River, and that has long changed its route into the Mississippi, but still that valley is there. So I thought that would be a cool place to explore, because you have bluffs on either side of you, and maybe there's stairs, maybe there's something other things. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide. And that's one thing about the brewery building, is you have these fantastic details. And so go ahead and advance. So walking down Jackson Street, about a block and a half, 2 blocks south of the brewery, I ran into this complex. And this is called Convivium. And the place is amazing because the people who run that have taken an old greenhouse and florist complex, and they've repurposed it into, almost like an urban farm enterprise, because there's a coffee shop, there's a restaurant, there's art space, there's classrooms, and it's almost like a working farm. And if we just take a look at the next slide, you can see here's the inside. There's, part of the murals. Here's a mural inside, the restaurant area of Convivium, and we'll do another slide. And in the backside, that's very much like a working farm. And one of the things I found out is that as you walk around the neighborhood, you'll see various yards that have been turned into, large garden plots, and they're all part of this whole Convivium enterprise. So I don't know how the current pandemic has affected this enterprise, but it's just I find it a very cool idea to repurpose a structure and take advantage of vacant land to turn it into a, let's say an urban agricultural oasis. And then continue on Jackson Street. So if we go ahead and advance a slide, I've always been a Chicago White Sox fan. And when I saw that Dubuque had their Comiskey Park, I had to check that out. And at the south end of the park at Jackson and 24th Street, there's this plaque, and it says Comiskey Field, is dedicated in 1929, and the name is in honor of Charles A. Comiskey. Well, Charles A. Comiskey, he founded the Chicago White Sox and built Comiskey Park in Chicago. So there's this connection in Dubuque with Comiskey Park. So, and as I say, as a White Sox fan, it was like a pilgrimage that I had to check it out. But if you go now, if you go about a block east from this marker, there's this B Branch Greenway. When Petey and I first did our wanderings around Dubuque, this wasn't around. And I did some research, and it turns out there was a creek in the area. And during the early part of the 20th century, to accommodate development, the creek was buried under the street into culverts. And what I read is those culverts did not have the capacity to carry water, storm water. So consequently, there's quite a bit of flooding in the area. So the city then went ahead and decided, let's open up that culvert and we'll turn it into a park, and this fabulous park. And I know I have another picture that I took a few weeks after this one, where the water, there had been a storm, and the storm water was covering that sidewalk. So it's really kind of a nice way to continue the walk. You could take this further south, and let's go to the next one. But as part of that whole project for flood control in the whole B Branch watershed, you're going to find these green alleys. And these green alleys were built rather than having water rush up out of the alley into the street and down into the flood zone. They've positioned the bricks on here to allow the water to percolate into the ground, and this is part of the flood control. So as you walk around, you can keep an eye out for the green alleys. Go ahead and advance the next one. And as part of your walking around, just always keep an eye out for these wonderful details on the building. This one is at 26 and Central. So let's go to the next one. This, if there's anybody in the audience who knows what this is, please tell me, just chat right now. But this is at 24th and Broadway. You can stand at that corner, and if you look into the backyards of the house, you'll see this eyebrow. It's like a masonry opening into the bottom of the bluff. And I have no idea if this was a root cellar, if it was a brewery cave, or if it's an old, mine opening.
Yes, it was a brewery cave. There was a brewery that sat down between 23rd and 24th Street.
Uh-huh.
And so the cave sits behind there, and that's one of the air vents.
Okay.
The city had knocked down the big cave, and that sits right behind what the city's bus barn is today on the
Okay.
corner of 24th and Central. That was the old city bus barn.
Uh-huh.
And the brewmaster's house for that brewery, he is on Broadway Street, 24th and Broadway Street. when you come
Okay.
up there. Yeah.
All right, good. Is that the one that's then is the second Empire style house with the mansard roof?
That's right. That's the one.
All right.
And that was, from my understanding, the brewmaster lived in that home.
All right, well, that's cool. Well, you've solved a mystery for me. We can
Great.
close right now then.
Okay.
No, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We live in the.
Thank you. All right, well, let's
Welcome.
just continue. Yes? All right, we'll go ahead and continue then. So go ahead and advance the slide again, Michael. That, if we go back to the Beat Branch Greenway and Comiskey Park, on the east side of it, we've got the Iowa Heritage Trail. So when I was looping back from that area, I took this back to where I started. And go ahead to the next one. The next slide. When I went back, I started, all of a sudden it was like a concert with the church bells, and the music was so wonderful. And I took a look over there and I saw the church. And so I was just, I was obligated, and that's part of wandering. It's not only letting what you see guide you and where you go, it's what you hear and what you feel and what you sense. So I obviously had to go over to see where the music was coming from. And so let's just go to the next slide. And behind the church, there was this wonderful grotto, and it's almost like an all-star lineup going along the base of the bluff there. That in this picture, we could see we've got the Infant of Prague, we've got the Virgin Guadalupe, we've got St. Francis, we've got Jesus, and Mary's up there, further in the bluff. And so it was just so cool to find this along the bluff. So from there, I started walking north. So let's go to the next slide. And here was this path going up to the top of the bluff. And there was a little statue of St. Francis. So I started following that path. Now, I don't recommend that path because there's fallen trees and, there's a lot of stuff you have to scramble around. But when I got to the top, and let's go to the next one, I ran into this Re-Evolution farmstead. And so I called up the people, the phone number there. And apparently, and what that path was, is this area was the athletic field, the softball field and the soccer fields for the parish school down at the base of the bluff. And that path was the route to get up there. And with with the church deciding to sell the property, this couple has bought that property, and they're in the process of converting that into, an urban farmstead that, that they've got places for, people who grow food to sell at farmers markets and what have you. And so, I'm sure it's going to take them several years to fully develop it. But again, it's just kind of an interesting enterprise that people have to repurpose, land to, in this case, going from a athletic field to an urban farm. So, and that's just, just the type of things that you find when you start to wander. So now what I'd like to do is, and I know everybody here is from Dubuque, but, Galena is just on the other side of the river, and it's also a fun place to check out. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And just like we started walking from the library from Carnegie-Stout, we'll start our walk from the Galena Library. The Galena Library is at the top of those steps. So But if we go to the next slide, but if we go to the back side of the library, there are these steps that are going up through the woods to get to the top of the bluff. So we'll go again. Yeah, and so you can see here the steps, looking down, and go ahead and move the slide again. But when we got to the top, we found this place called Linmar Gardens. And you can see Petey down there in the bottom of the picture, but when we got there, the person who lived there, this was long after their tourist season. So he took us through there, and there's just all these wild sculptures. Like this sculpture is right there at the entrance, and it's made by a metal sculptor in Galena named John Martinson. But in this Linmar Gardens, there was a foundation of an old church, mine openings, stairs, different plants. So it's it's definitely an interesting place to check out. So we'll just continue with the slides. But that path that went to Linmar Gardens, well, this sort of driveway will then connect to Prospect Street. And certainly that's the old high school in Galena, which dominates the western skyline. If you're in downtown Galena and you look up, the old high school, which is now a condo development, dominates the skyline. So we'll just continue. But along Prospect, and that's Prospect Street that we're going on, but there's these fabulous houses. So we'll continue again. And then when you get to the, Washington Street steps, we'll take these steps up, and we'll go to the next slide. This is just before Halloween when I took the picture, and there's this guest house there, and they had the Halloween decorations. I thought it was kind of cool with these witches out there brewing up something, but we'll go ahead to the next slide. But if you get to the top of the steps, you're now at High Street, and Ulysses S. Grant's pre-Civil War home is just down the street. So we'll go to the next slide. And this is where Ulysses S. Grant and his family lived, prior to the Civil War. And it's really an interesting story that I know there's the Grant house on the other side of the river, that's a big tourist attraction. But the real, at least from my perspective, the real story of Ulysses S. Grant is that he was, if he had not moved to Galena, he would not have had the career that he eventually had, because he was a West Point graduate. He is a Mexican War veteran, and after the Mexican War, he was assigned to Army posts out on the West Coast, and he was separated from his family. And his personality was he needed to have his family around to feel functional. And so consequently, he went into a depression. He tried to find solace in the bottle, and he was forced out of the Army for being a drunk. And that was in 1854. And he had to borrow money to get back to his family, which at that time was living in the St. Louis area, because his wife's family was in the St. Louis area. And everything he tried flopped. He was really down to the point of dragging firewood and selling it along the road in St. Louis. And so, but in the meantime, his father had a successful leather business with tanneries in Ohio, and one of his leather stores was in Galena. So Grant was he was in debt. He had nowhere to go, so he finally had to turn to his father, and his father offered him a job working for his younger brothers at the Galena leather store. And so he came to Galena in April of 1860. And then obviously when the Civil War started in April of 1861, his fortunes changed. But I'll talk a little more about that. But if it was the people he met in Galena that advanced his career. So if he had not moved to Galena, he would not have had the military career that he, or becoming the president that he had. So let's just keep going. So we'll go to the next. the house immediately north of Grant's pre-Civil War home has these interesting decorations. And again, that's just part of what you see when you wander. So we'll go to the next one. So if we get to the next street, that's Hill. Well, if we go west on Hill, we'll start walking there. And that building that we're seeing in this, that building that we're seeing there, it's now an apartment building, but when it was built in 1855, it was built as a German Methodist church. So it's interesting to think that there were enough German-speaking Methodists in the area to support their own church. So it's just, again, you just sort of find out these interesting tidbits. And now we'll go to the next one. This is actually, and it's around the corner from, Grant's house in a couple blocks west. But these are the homes of, on the left is, John Raleigh, and on the, wait, let me get there's Raleigh and, oh my gosh, now I'm getting a brain cramp. I'll tell you in just 1 second. Okay, John Rollins is on the right and William Raleigh is on the left. Both of them were on Grant's staff during the Civil War. Both of them became generals. But John Rollins, the house on the right, he really was critical for Grant's success because he was Grant's chief of staff, but he was also what we might call a sober companion because John Rollins' father was an alcoholic. And so John Rollins was an extreme teetotaler. And so he kept an eye on Ulysses S. Grant to make sure that Grant did not slip into a depression, which would then lead to a significant bender. So his job was really keeping Grant on track, and he did that. And if it hadn't been for somebody like John Rollins, Grant probably would not have, been able to advance the way he did in the military. So now let's just go to the next slide. If we decide to go back towards the center of Galena, we can go through this nice park. We'll go to the next slide. And that'll take us back to the intersection of High and Washington. And so just to our left is where Grant's pre-Civil War home. And so Grant, to get around, he walked. And so he would have walked, and these houses that we're seeing here, they would have been here when Ulysses S. Grant lived here. And when you see the no outlet sign, when you're on foot, that shouldn't discourage you. That's only to discourage cars, because if you're on foot, you want to check out to see, because there could be a path there, there could be a stairway there. In the case of here, we'll go to the next slide. There's a stairway here. These were the stairs we took up the Washington Street steps. So, instead of stopping at Prospect, we'll keep going and take those. We'll go to the next one down to Bench. And if you've been to Galena, you've probably seen the old firehouse. The church, the building just to the right, that's the Methodist Church in Galena. And that's where the Grant family went to church. And if you go to the next slide, if you go inside the church, if it's open, or if you can get somebody to let you in, you can check out the Grant family pew. That was where the Grant family sat when they went to the church services. And so we'll just go to the next slide. And then we can continue down the Washington Street. The steps take us all the way down to Main Street. And when you get there, there's this little pocket park right at the bottom of Washington Street. And if we'll go to the next slide, right across the street, that's the Coatsworth Building. And that's where the Grant leather business was. The Grant leather business didn't have the whole building. It had part of the building, at the left, the left-hand side. And that's where, and so, the steps we just went down, that was the same stairway, obviously it was wooden when Ulysses S. Grant was here. It's now concrete, but that's the same stairway route that Ulysses S. Grant would have taken to get from his job working for his younger brothers at the leather store, getting back up to his family at the top of the hill. And so if we go to the next slide, and this is just a picture looking up at the Washington Street steps. And we'll go now from here, we can take some steps and bridges and paths and sidewalks to get to the other side of the street, and we'll go there. So we'll go to the next slide. And this is the Ellihoe Washburn house, which is at 3rd, at US 20 and 3rd Street. Well, Ellihoe Washburn, he was the congressman, for the Galena area prior to the Civil War and during the Civil War. And he was a political associate of Abraham Lincoln. And it was Ellihoe Washburn that recommended, Grant, to get into the Army and also for generalship. So Ellihoe Washburn played a critical role in advancing his career. And when Grant ran for president, Ellihoe Washburn's house was equipped with telegraph. So it was in this house that Ulysses Grant listened to the election returns. I guess our timing is probably pretty good on that now, but it was in that house that he found out that he was elected president of the United States. And as a personal note, my great grandmother, her father bought this house. His name was Thomas J. Sheehan from the Washburn family when Ellihoe Washburn moved to Chicago, in the late 1870s or so, and it stayed in the family until it was, until the state took it over in the 1960s. And I personally had the opportunity of going there, in 1958 when I was 11 years old. And I remember, my father's great aunt talking about, right here in this room is where Ulysses Grant found out he was president. And then she was talking about how, the house to the north of there, wasn't there. So that land was used for drilling military troops, and Ellihoe Washburn had Indian powwows there. So it was just very interesting to hear that. And so let's go to the next slide because we're wrapping it up now. I like to close out all of these type of talks with this slide. That dog there, that's not Petey, that's Lucky. He's no longer with us. But Lucky and I, we walked the Appalachian Trail together. And so we had plenty of conversations. And Lucky always told me this: all walks are good. I don't know how long this walk is going to be, but I do know one thing. This is the best walk I've ever been on because this is the walk I am on right now. So with that, I'm happy to open it up to questions, and hopefully, this was worth your time. So thank you very much. I really appreciate everybody coming.
Thank you.
There's a lot of questions in the chat, and I think I'd like to start there if that's all right.
Yeah, Mike, it's all up to you.
Let me pull these up here.
I should say that if you're interested in the book, River Lights Bookstore does have it in stock. So
I'd like to read both of David's books. Would he suggest The Gentle Art of Wandering or Exploring on Foot to read first?
It doesn't, they're both, they're both sort of different topics. So you could definitely read them in whichever order you get them. I don't, the River Lights doesn't have The Gentle Art of Wandering. That's at Amazon. And it's also on my website, gentleartofwandering.com.
What was the impetus for the repair of the steps on 11th and Bluff?
I'm not which Which repairs are you talking about?
Well,
now?
so many of the steps have been repaired, so many of them haven't.
Okay,
And the
Well-
ones that aren't repaired are now in disrepair to the point where they've closed them off. And it seems like they ought to repair all of them,
yeah.
as a matter of fact.
Well, as I say, obviously, me personally, I know there are stairs that have been closed down in Dubuque, and there used to be more stairs. I would love to see more stairways, but cities have limited, they only have so much money to spend, and the only way to get things done is to, bug your alderman or district council person, whatever
Right.
term you have, and bug them and say, hey, I'd like to get this fixed because this is a cool place. Because 11th Street steps, they are really, as I say, it's a magical stairway, and it would be really a shame, for those not to be safe to walk on, because it is just gorgeous to do that walk. But you just got to bug your representative in government and say, this is what you want.
Right. Have you gotten together with Main Street Dubuque?
No, I haven't.
Now,
But
they
I'd
have
be happy to-
architectural days every spring. And
Yeah.
it's great to have them and you do a joint tour of some type.
I would be happy to do that. As I say, if it hadn't been for COVID, I'm sure Petey and I would have been to Dubuque at least 2 or 3 times this year, but unfortunately, we haven't been able to do it. If we're able to travel next spring, I would love for that to do that.
Yeah.
Here are some comments in the chat. The renovation of the Richards house, which
Yes.
you had early on,
Yeah.
has been going on for decades.
Well, it looks like it, and I'm sure it's got to cost $1 million to get all those details right. So, but I'm not I'm not a contractor, so I'm just throwing out a guess.
And then around the corner from there, the first ecumenical event in Dubuque is when a German boy from St. Mary's married an Irish girl from St. Pat's. Another
Well,
comment.
And that's part of the assimilation that happens, that they needed to get comfortable with the country before they could walk across the street and date somebody from there.
Central was originally a brick clay street with a trolley.
Yeah. Oh, neat.
Let me see. Convivium is the former Muntz greenhouse. It's
Yeah.
definitely an ongoing workplace.
Yeah.
And Comiskey is from Dubuque. And then the caves near there, these are caves which permeate Dubuque. Someone says, I think it was a brewery cave, and then someone else says a beer cellar. That's
Yeah.
B-I-E-R, the German spelling.
Yes. Nice. Well, as I say, I'm coming back, so I'm making a list of stuff I need to check out because as I say, you talk about it. For a town the size of Dubuque, it's unlimited what you can discover.
Are you
Come to
familiar
mind.
with the stairway at the intersection of Dodge and Locust Street that leads
Yeah.
up to Cleveland Park?
Right, right.
I look for those stairways, and I think that stairway. I went to Cleveland Park to try and find that stairway, and I think it's been taken. There may be remains, but it was kind of a snowy day when I went there, so I wasn't about to bushwhack down the hill. But
No,
I personally,
that used to be a street, see?
yeah,
And they took the street out, but that one, when it was a street, it was a stairway. And it went
okay,
all the way to Cleveland Park.
yeah. And the thing about it is that land, when you have those paper streets, that land is owned by the city. So there's no reason why you can't pester your representative in government to say, hey, let's put a hiking path in there or something.
Sure.
Because I think the more things you can do to walk around, it's just more opportunities for people.
Yeah, that's so true.
David, have you done any walks in Seattle's Queen Anne neighborhood, there are a lot of hill climbs which have stairs that go between houses, end in pocket parks, and have beautiful views and are amazing. If you've
Yeah.
not been there, I'd highly recommend you try walking in that area. It's very
Well,
interesting.
I've not done it, but I know some people who are big into stairways in Seattle. So when Petey and I get a chance to get out there, I definitely plan to do that. Thank you for the tip.
About that earlier stairway, it's fenced off in Cleveland Park. You can still get to the stairway trail from the southwest corner at Dodge and Locust Street. It's a one-way stair trail now. Lots of vegetation hides the start of the trail.
Right.
I will check. So that's at Dodge and Locust. I will.
Southwest corner at Dodge and Locust.
But that's
Okay.
kind of a landlocked place now. I mean, it'd be hard.
Yeah.
You'd have to walk in there in some sort of another way, because it's
Yeah.
right on the expressway.
Yeah, I know. Well, that was the thing, is that US 20 is like a expressway there. So
Right. Very
yeah.
busy.
No, but that's just part of, as I say, we checked, we went to all the places that used to have stairways, and you figure that's city land. There could be
Right.
easy. I don't want to say it's easy because it's not my time and money, but it would be nice to develop some hiking trails,
Sure.
where there used to be stairways.
Now, you know the seminary steps?
Which ones are those now?
Well, they run off of 17th and they go up to, I think it's called Seminary Park.
Okay,
Which
well,
is-
there was a stairway, at Madison Park.
Madison Park, that's it. That's
Yeah,
it.
Yeah,
Those
well,
are the seminary steps.
yeah, and those are, and that's removed now. There is a
Right.
stairway that goes up to a house just below Madison Park. And
Exactly.
there used to be, when Petey and I did our first road trip, there was a stairway next to that old firehouse on Central,
You're right.
north of the seminary, and that went on up to the street above Central there. But that
Right.
was
Heat
taken out
Street.
just the last couple of years.
Yeah, the retaining wall went in on that, so that's had some major repairs.
Yeah. So as I say, you can't fault the city too much, because if we don't use these type of things,
Mhm.
they have to spend their maintenance dollars where, it's going to get the most use. So if we like to walk, it's just good to get out there to let people know, hey, this is a valuable thing and we like it.
There was a follow-up comment about the trail at southwest corner and Dodge and Locust. There are old sidewalk light fixtures on that.
Oh,
that
they go
stairway
up the
trail.
hill? Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So you can look for those. And then someone else wants to know, they still see a few old horse hitching posts. And have you seen any of those on your walks?
Yes, I have. And if I remember correctly, I think I saw a couple. If you take the 4th Street elevator, Finland Place, and you walk in those streets, there's a couple places where you can still see some horse hitching posts.
Our church had some. We took them out at our church. We're on 17th in Iowa, but across the street at the Episcopal Church, at the old Methodist Episcopal Church, I
Yeah.
think they're still there.
Okay, cool.
I think they are.
Nice.
Now, I had conversations with a good friend of mine who told me stories when he was a kid. He started at the top of Loris.
Yeah.
Kids used to, on their sleds, and they could sled all the way from Loris College down to the railroad tracks
Nice.
on Loris. And they put kids at every one of the intersections just to protect them.
Yeah. Well, as I say, who knows, things can evolve in different ways that, more and more people, I think, are finding the value of walkable communities. And certainly there's the opportunities there with the stairways and the interesting architecture in Dubuque.
David, could you tell us about counting steps? Which which stairways have the most, and
All right, well,
someone wants to know if Washington
Well, in the
Street and
book-
Galena has the most.
in the book, I did make a chart of the stair counts. And so the tallest stairway in Galena is the Washington Street steps. And I'm looking at the book right now. Those are 252 steps. And then if we go into Dubuque, the 11th Street steps, it's a total of 173. There's a stairway at 5th Street that has 127 steps. And then if you go to the Little Maquoketa River Mounds, there's 120 steps to get up to the mounds there. So I do have the step counts. There's a little chart showing the step counts in the book.
When we first came to Dubuque, we didn't have anything to do. So every holiday we chose another set of steps and
Yeah.
counted every step
Yeah,
and charted it. I'll have to send that to you.
good, please. And also keep in mind, when I did the step count, all the step counts I did can always be plus or minus a couple because
Right.
because you start counting and then so you bump into somebody and they say hi to you and then okay, where was I?
What other cities have you discovered places to walk and wander in?
All right, well, Los Angeles is a spectacular place. They have, I could tell you that the first time I went to, most of the time when I went to Los Angeles, I just thought of traffic. But when I did this trip to Los Angeles to check out the stairs, it was purely a walking trip. And it was just an amazing experience. Bisbee, Arizona, probably, and Petey and I did a book on Bisbee, Arizona. It's an old mining town in Arizona. And all the flatland was occupied by commercial structures. So all the miners had to live on the sides of the hills. And so there were mule trails that eventually became stairs and they were wood. And then during the Depression, the WPA came in and turned all those stairways into concrete. But it's just weird because these stairs will zigzag, to accommodate different property lines. So, there's, over 100 stairways in Bisbee. So that's a cool place to go, Bisbee, Arizona, for stairs. And
How
there's
about San Francisco?
Well, San Francisco has hundreds of stairways too, and there's a good guidebook to the stairways in San Francisco.
Now you've been to Eagle Point Park, I hope.
Yeah, of course. I even mentioned it in the book, and I tried to see if I could find that old stairway, but and I tried from the bottom and I tried from the top, but I think that that stairway is probably just whatever remains of it is just too difficult to get to.
Well, the trolley that went up there, that's very evident.
Yeah, but there was a stairway that went from at Eagle Point Park before they built the dam and the bridge. There was a beach down at the river and a stairway from the park down to the river, but the beach went away with the dam, and then eventually the stairway went away.
Yeah. And you heard about the bridge that was there?
Yeah, and that but it's been gone. It was replaced, but that bridge went right over where the dam is practically. So
right, yeah, it had a dog leg in
it. Right. Yeah.
There's another comment. Thank you very much. I've been on most of your Dubuque walks, but not Galena, and I want to visit and revisit both. So thank you for the inspiration.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And
fascinated by the artwork in Galena. That's what we need in Dubuque.
Yeah. Well, you've got the murals, and those are and murals have become popular, across the country. But I'll tell you, the murals in Dubuque they're really, really great artworks. I mean, they're outstanding.
The Carnegie-Stout Library has a copy of your book to check out, but then there are copies available at Riverlight's bookstore And then you also have them on your website as well.
Yes, I do.
So I really hope people go and check out the book. It's a really neat guidebook, and a lot of the photos that you've shared are in the book, and you have a chart with the steps, and it's just really fascinating. Thank you very much for spending some time with us and telling us about your walks.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Thank you.
And
David.
I wanted to let everyone know after the Zoom here, if you have any comments about the format or how we're handling this, I'd love to hear them so we can make improvements. If you've received an email with the Zoom link, just reply to that and let me know how we can make this a little bit better. And watch out, we're going to have some other authors and events coming up, and thank you very much for coming.
Good. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you very much.